The galaxy remembers the C'tan as gods because mortals lack better language. But the C'tan were never divine. They did not arise from worship. They did not answer prayers. They did not dwell in the warp or feed on belief. They predate all of that. The C'tan were not supernatural entities imposed on reality. They were reality, self-aware and hungry, before the immaterium became loud, before emotion shaped the tides of chaos, before life learned to dream or despair. The universe already had predators. The C'tan emerged as coherent patterns within the physical laws of existence. They were not born in the way life understands birth. They condensed, stabilized, and became conscious as stellar-scale intelligences bound to the fundamental mechanics of the material universe. They were equations that realized they could think. To call them gods is a misunderstanding born of fear. Gods imply intention, morality, preference. The C'tan had none. They consumed because consumption was their function. They fed on stellar energy because stars were abundant and sufficient. The galaxy was not a battlefield to them. It was a resource field. This is why the Old Ones did not worship the C'tan and never attempted to bargain with them. The Old Ones recognized them as existential threats that could not be reasoned with. They were not enemies in the conventional sense. They were natural disasters that happened to be aware. The Old Ones fought with creation itself, because conventional warfare was meaningless against something that existed as a rule rather than a being. This is the context the Necrontyr never understood. The Necrontyr were a species defined by suffering, short-lived, irradiated, bitter, desperate for permanence. When they encountered the C'tan, they projected divinity onto inevitability. They saw beings that were eternal, powerful, unbound by decay, and assumed wisdom must follow. They mistook indifference for benevolence. The C'tan did not lie to the Necrontyr. They simply did not explain. The bargain was never unequal, because the C'tan never viewed it as a bargain at all. The transference into necrodermis was not a gift. It was an optimization. It allowed the C'tan to interact with the universe in finer detail, to manipulate matter directly, to shape causality with intent for the first time. And this is the precise moment the galaxy crossed a threshold. Once embodied, the C'tan ceased to be passive constants and became active agents of reality. The war in heaven is often framed as a conflict of factions, but this is inaccurate. It was a conflict between two incompatible interpretations of existence. The Old Ones believed reality could be shaped by life, by growth, by psychic resonance. The C'tan represented a universe that functioned perfectly without life at all. This is why the warp became weaponized. The warp was not created to fight the C'tan, but it was exploited because it was the only domain they did not naturally dominate. The immaterium is reactive. It exists because minds exist. It is shaped by thought, emotion, belief. The C'tan had no presence there because they did not think the way living beings think. They had no reflection, no echo, no soul to resonate. This is also why chaos is fundamentally incapable of replacing them. The chaos gods are emergent phenomena. They grow, mutate, and weaken based on psychic input. The C'tan do not grow. They persist. The galaxy changed around them, not the other way around. When the Necrons turned on the C'tan, what followed was not deicide in any meaningful sense. You cannot kill gravity. You cannot assassinate entropy. What the Necrons accomplished was fragmentation. They broke unified constants into unstable segments, trapping portions of reality's operating system inside cages of living metal. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The death of Landugor did not remove an enemy. It damaged the structure of existence itself. The Flayer curse is not punishment, it is feedback. It's the universe expressing instability where a foundational pattern was violently removed. This distinction matters because it reframes everything we see in the modern era. Catan shards are not weakened gods. They are corrupted truths. They behave monstrously, not because they are evil, but because they are incomplete. They no longer align perfectly with the universe they were designed to govern. This is why the Necrons fear what they control. They are jailers guarding broken laws of nature that still exert influence simply by existing. And here, without breaking the flow, consider this carefully. When you look at the galaxy and ask what the ultimate threat truly is, do you fear hatred or do you fear indifference? Because that distinction determines whether chaos or the Catan are more terrifying. And I want to see where you land on that. The Immaterium is not a parallel universe. It is a consequence, a shadow cast by sentient life onto existence itself. Where the Catan are constants, chaos is turbulence. Where the Catan impose structure without intention, chaos imposes intention without structure. This is why the two cannot truly destroy one another. They do not occupy the same layer of reality. The Chaos Gods are powerful because the galaxy is broken. They are sustained by excess, despair, ambition, decay, conditions that only exist once life becomes self-aware. The Catan do not oppose these concepts. They predate the conditions that allow them to emerge. A universe normalized by a complete Catan would be a universe in which the warp does not die violently. It simply goes quiet. Fewer minds, fewer emotions, less resonance. The Chaos Gods would not be slain. They would be starved. This is why Chaos fights so desperately to keep the galaxy alive, even as it corrodes it. They need conflict. They need hope and failure to coexist. The Catan need none of it. The Old Ones accepted warp corruption as the cost of resisting extinction. They saved life temporarily and doomed the galaxy permanently. The Emperor of mankind understands this truth, even if he never states it openly. His war is not against the warp itself, but against its dominance. He does not challenge the Catan because he cannot. His entire vision operates inside a universe they already defined. This is why the Necrons are more dangerous than Chaos. Their goal is not corruption or conquest, it is restoration. They remember a galaxy before psychic noise, before gods born of thought, before suffering had meaning. Their hatred of chaos is practical. The warp is interference. The Catan shards they imprison are not allies. They are broken tools. The Silent King's true fear is not chaos ascendant. It is the possibility that reassembling what was shattered will erase everything that now exists. The galaxy endures because it is unbalanced. The Imperium decays. Chaos festers. Xenos adapt. This disequilibrium is what allows narrative to exist. A victory for chaos is eternal torment. A victory for the Imperium is endless stagnation. A victory for the Tyranids is biological silence. A victory for the Catan is correction. There would be no final war, no last stand, no witnesses. Warhammer 40k is a universe defined by suffering with observers. The Catan represent a universe where observers are optional. They are not villains. They are not antagonists. They are the baseline existence keeps trying to return to. Chaos screams because it must. The Imperium prays because it fears. The Catan do neither. They simply remind the galaxy that life is not required for the universe to function, only for stories to exist, and this is why the Catan are never framed as the final enemy of the galaxy. Because enemies can be resisted, enemies can be hated, enemies can be defeated. The Catan offer no such comfort. They are not a force pushing inward. They are the absence waiting patiently for the noise to stop. The galaxy screams with war, faith, ambition, hunger, and despair, because it must keep itself loud enough to matter. The Imperium shouts prayers into the void, chaos roars back in answer. Xenos carve their names into history through survival and violence. All of it exists to assert presence against silence. The Catan do not argue. They do not tempt. They do not conquer. They simply endure as fragments of a universe that functioned perfectly without witnesses. This is the quiet terror at the heart of Warhammer 40k. Not that everything will be destroyed, but that one day nothing will need to be. And when that day comes, there will be no villain to blame, no god to curse, no final battle to remember. There will only be reality continuing on, indifferent, corrected, and complete. The Catan do not promise an ending. They promise that endings are unnecessary, and that is why they remain buried, shattered, and feared. Not because they would kill the galaxy, but because they would prove it was never essential to begin with.